Now to a very disturbing story, and we do want to warn you, the details are extremely difficult to hear. A father facing a judge accused of killing his baby girl while sexually assaulting her.
Luna is accused of blocking the child's nose and mouth with an unknown object.
The first cry of a baby is supposed to be a promise of life, of love, protection, and safety. But what happens when the very person trusted to protect that child becomes the reason her life is stolen? Have you ever looked at a baby's face and seen nothing but innocence? Have you ever wondered how anyone could harm something so pure, so defenseless? This is the story of Savayah Mason, an 8-month-old baby girl from Houston, Texas. Her life ended before it even had a chance to begin, in one of the most shocking and heartbreaking cases the city has ever seen. What unfolded behind the walls of a small apartment in August 2020 would leave a community shaken, investigators horrified, and a jury faced with the unimaginable. Before we continue, if this is your first time here, welcome. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Feel free to share in the comments. And to our amazing community, especially those of you who return week after week to seek justice and raise awareness, you are the reason this channel exists. Every share, every comment, every like is a voice for the voiceless. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because every case we cover is a chance to remember, to reflect, and to honor lives gone too soon. Savayah was born in late 2019. She was tiny, with bright eyes and soft baby curls, the kind of child that drew smiles wherever she was carried. At only 8 months old, she was still learning to crawl, still making sense of the world. She had no words yet, only soft giggles and cries, but her presence filled the room. To her mother, she was joy. To her family, she was hope. To those who met her, she was proof of how delicate and beautiful life could be. But beneath that fragile beauty was a dangerous reality. Savayah's father, Luis Luna, was not the man people believed him to be. At just 23 years old, Luna had already shown signs of instability and recklessness. Those closest to him might have brushed off his anger or his odd behaviors as stress, as the struggles of a young father, but no one could have imagined the darkness that would come to light. The morning of August 24th, 2020, started like any other inside Luna's small Houston apartment, but within hours, it would turn into a nightmare that even hardened detectives struggled to describe. Around midday, Luna suddenly rushed into the living room, holding baby Savayah in his arms. She was limp, lifeless. He screamed for help, trying to appear frantic as he begged someone to call 911. A desperate emergency call was made, and first responders arrived within minutes. Paramedics worked quickly, rushing the baby to the hospital, but it was already too late. Savayah was pronounced dead soon after arrival. The medical team looked at her tiny body and immediately knew something was wrong. This wasn't a case of sudden illness. This wasn't a tragic accident. There were marks, bruises where they should never be, injuries that no baby could ever cause on her own. Doctors contacted investigators right away, and what followed was the start of one of the most disturbing child murder cases Harris County had ever seen. Detectives from the Houston Police Department arrived at the hospital and later at the apartment where Savayah had spent her final hours. What they uncovered painted a horrific picture of violence and cruelty. The autopsy later revealed that Savayah had suffered unimaginable abuse. She had been sexually assaulted. She had blunt force trauma to her tiny body. There were signs of suffocation, and ligature marks showed that she had been restrained. Even seasoned investigators, men and women who had seen years of crime scenes, were shaken. One officer later said, "It was the kind of case that stays with you forever." The investigation quickly focused on Luis Luna. He had been alone with Savayah when she became unresponsive. Evidence inside the apartment only strengthened suspicions. Bloody baby wipes were discovered inside a trash bag near his bed. Luna's story about what happened kept shifting. At first, he claimed she had stopped breathing suddenly. Then he tried to suggest it was an accident, but the physical evidence told the truth he could not hide. The brutality of the crime left prosecutors with no doubt. This was not only a case of murder, it was capital murder, and the victim was his own daughter. The news spread quickly across Houston. Neighbors who had once seen Luna carrying his daughter now stared at the apartment with shock and disgust. For the community, it was impossible to comprehend. How could a father, the one person meant to guard and protect, inflict such terror on his baby girl? As the case moved forward, the details only grew darker. Autopsy results confirmed that the cause of death was a combination of suffocation and assault. The medical examiner's report read like a list of horrors no one wanted to believe could happen to a child. For Savayah's mother, the pain was unbearable. She had trusted Luna with their daughter. She had believed, like many parents do, that even if things were not perfect between them, he would never hurt his own child. That trust was shattered forever. Meanwhile, prosecutors prepared to bring one of the most serious charges possible under Texas law: capital murder of a child under the age of 10. If convicted, Luna would face either the death penalty or life without parole. The community demanded justice. The courtroom would later become the stage where the darkest truths of what happened inside that apartment were revealed. But before the trial even began, investigators worked day and night to ensure no detail was overlooked. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, every photograph of Savayah's injuries spoke of a crime too horrific to ignore. Detectives admitted it was one of the hardest cases of their careers, not just because of the brutality, but because the victim was a baby who had no chance to fight back, no voice to cry for help. And as the world would come to learn, Luis Luna was not only guilty of neglect, he was guilty of the most unforgivable betrayal, destroying the very life he had helped create. The days after Savayah Mason's death were filled with grief, shock, and questions that no one could answer. At just 8 months old, she had become the victim of a crime so brutal that even experienced investigators struggled to find words. The Houston Police Department quickly secured a search warrant for Luis Luna's apartment. They needed to know exactly what had happened in those final hours. Inside, they found evidence that told a chilling story. A trash bag sat near the bed where Luna had slept. Inside were bloody baby wipes smeared with signs of violence. These wipes weren't just trash, they were proof that Luna had tried to clean up what he had done. Detectives also found signs of disturbance in the room, areas that suggested struggle. What disturbed them most, though, was that Luna had not acted like a grieving father. In interviews, his answers were inconsistent, his emotions flat. At first, he claimed he had simply found his daughter unresponsive. Then, as questions pressed harder, his story shifted. He said she may have rolled off the bed, but the injuries on Savayah's tiny body didn't match his words. The autopsy was the turning point. Forensic examiners discovered a combination of blunt force trauma, sexual assault, and suffocation. The ligature marks around her body suggested she had been restrained. These findings left no doubt this was not an accident. This was intentional. It was murder. When detectives presented the results to prosecutors, the decision was immediate. Luis Luna would be charged with capital murder of a child under 10, one of the most serious charges in Texas. The community reacted with outrage and heartbreak. News stations across Houston carried the story, their anchors struggling to describe the cruelty of the crime. For many watching, it was almost too much to process. How could a father commit such an act against his own baby? People gathered online to express grief and anger. Strangers sent condolences to Savayah's family, while others demanded the harshest punishment for Luna. For Savayah's mother, the pain was unbearable. She had trusted Luna with their daughter, never imagining he would harm her. In the weeks that followed, she faced the impossible, planning a funeral for her baby girl. Tiny white flowers decorated the service. A small pink coffin held the body of a child whose life had been stolen before it had begun. Those who attended said it was one of the most heartbreaking funerals they had ever witnessed. Meanwhile, investigators continued building the case. They gathered Luna's phone records, searched his online history, and interviewed neighbors. Prosecutors needed to ensure there would be no doubt in court. They wanted the jury to see the truth, to understand the brutality Savayah endured. Luna was placed in jail to await trial. Even there, his behavior was troubling. Reports later suggested he showed little remorse, often appearing cold when questioned about his daughter. To those following the case, it was another sign of the darkness inside him. As the months turned into years, the legal process moved slowly. The COVID-19 pandemic caused delays in court proceedings across the country, including in Houston. For Savayah's family, each delay felt like another wound. They wanted justice, but justice seemed far away. Still, prosecutors reassured them the evidence was strong, and the case against Luna was airtight. By 2024, the trial was finally set. It had been 4 years since Savayah's death. 4 years of waiting, 4 years of pain, For her mother and relatives, walking into the courthouse was like reopening a wound that had never healed. The trial began with powerful opening statements. The prosecution painted a picture of unimaginable cruelty. They described how Luna had been the only adult with Savayah when she died, how the evidence left no room for doubt. They told the jury that this was not only murder, it was a betrayal of the most sacred bond, the bond between parent and child. The defense, on the other hand, tried to sow doubt. They suggested there was no direct witness to the crime. They claimed the injuries might not fully prove intent, but each time, the prosecution countered with evidence too strong to ignore. Jurors were shown photographs from the autopsy. They saw the marks on Savayah's body, the injuries she had suffered. Some jurors cried, others looked away, unable to stomach the images. The medical examiner took the stand and described in detail what had been done to the infant. Her words were clinical, but the weight of them was unbearable. Neighbors also testified. Some spoke about hearing unusual noises from the apartment. Others described Luna as distant, sometimes cold. The image of a loving father that Luna tried to project in the beginning crumbled quickly under the weight of testimony. And then there was the evidence from the apartment, the bloody baby wipes, the marks of restraint, the inconsistencies in Luna's story. All of it pointed in one direction. For prosecutors, the goal was clear: to show the jury that Luna had committed the ultimate betrayal, that he had not only failed as a father, but had actively destroyed the life he was meant to protect. As the trial unfolded, the community watched closely. News outlets covered every update, and social media filled with messages demanding justice. Parents across Houston hugged their children tighter, unable to imagine the fear and pain Savayah must have felt in her final moments. Even detectives who had worked the case attended the trial, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom. For them, this was more than just another case. This was about a baby whose cries would never be heard again. By the end of the second week, the prosecution had laid out its case in full. The jury had seen the photographs, heard the testimonies, and felt the weight of the evidence. When it was time for deliberation, it took them only hours to reach a decision. Luis Luna was found guilty of capital murder. The verdict was read aloud in court. Luna sat still, showing little reaction, but across the room, Savayah's mother wept. Her family held her close, tears running down their faces. For them, it was not the end of the pain. Nothing could bring Savayah back. But it was a step toward justice, a recognition of the horror their baby had endured. In October 2024, Luis Luna was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He would never walk free again. For prosecutors, it was a victory. For investigators, it was closure. For the community, it was justice. But for Savayah's family, it was only a reminder of what they had lost. A baby girl who should have grown up, gone to school, played in the park, and blown out birthday candles was gone forever. And the man who took her life was the very person who should have loved her most. The courtroom was heavy with silence as the trial of Luis Luna entered its final days. The faces of jurors told the story before the verdict even came. Some looked exhausted, some looked heartbroken. All of them had been forced to see evidence that no one should ever have to witness, images and details of what had been done to an 8-month-old child. For prosecutors, this trial was about more than proving guilt. It was about giving a voice to a baby who never had the chance to speak for herself. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, every word was for Savayah. Inside the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. The prosecution called expert witnesses to break down the evidence. Doctors spoke about the injuries found on Savayah's small body. They explained the blunt force trauma, the signs of suffocation, and the sexual assault. Jurors wiped tears. Some could not even look at the photographs. The defense tried to push back. They questioned whether the evidence truly proved intent. They suggested that no one had actually seen Luna commit the crime. They asked jurors to consider the possibility of an accident, but every time the prosecution reminded the jury of the facts, the autopsy results, the bloody wipes, the inconsistencies in Luna's story. This was not an accident. It was deliberate. One of the most powerful moments came when Savayah's mother took the stand. Her voice shook as she described her baby girl, the way her eyes lit up when she saw her mother, the little sounds she made when she was hungry or wanted to be held. She described the trust she once had in Luna, a trust that was now broken forever. "I never thought he would hurt her," she said through tears. "I trusted him with her life, and he took that life away." Her words filled the courtroom with raw emotion. Even court staff, used to hearing painful testimony, fought back tears. It was a reminder that behind the legal arguments and evidence charts, this was about a real baby, a child who never had the chance to grow up. The prosecution ended its case with a statement that echoed through the room. "Savayah Mason cannot stand here and tell you what happened. She cannot describe the pain she felt or the fear she endured. But the evidence does, and it tells us that Luis Luna, her own father, betrayed her in the most unimaginable way. Today, we speak for her. Today, we demand justice." When the jury left to deliberate, the courtroom remained tense. Families on both sides sat in silence. Hours passed, but when the jury returned, their decision was swift. The foreperson stood and delivered the verdict, guilty of capital murder. For a brief moment, the courtroom was silent. Then the sound of crying filled the air. Savayah's mother collapsed into her family's arms, sobbing. Relatives hugged one another, overwhelmed with grief and relief at the same time. For them, justice had been served, but it could never erase the pain. Luis Luna showed almost no reaction. He stared forward, stone-faced, as if the words had no meaning. His lack of emotion only deepened the anger of those who had followed the case. To many, it seemed like proof that he had no remorse, no sense of the life he had destroyed. The sentencing phase was equally emotional. Prosecutors reminded the court that the crime was among the most horrific they had ever seen. They argued that Luna's actions stripped away the most basic sense of humanity. The judge agreed, sentencing Luna to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In Texas, capital murder carries only two options: the death penalty or life without parole. In this case, prosecutors chose life, ensuring that Luna would spend the rest of his days behind bars. For the Mason family, it meant he would never walk free again, never have the chance to hurt another child. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. Cameras captured the faces of grieving family members as they walked out, holding one another tightly. Community members who had followed the case spoke to the press, calling it one of the most heartbreaking stories they had ever witnessed. One prosecutor, visibly shaken, told reporters, "This is one of the worst crimes I've seen in my entire career. The cruelty shown to this baby is beyond words. But today, we gave her a voice." Today, justice was served. In the days after sentencing, the city of Houston reflected on the case. News outlets ran special reports, highlighting the failures that allowed Luna to remain alone with his daughter, despite troubling behavior. Child advocacy groups spoke out, demanding stronger protections for vulnerable children. For them, the case of Savayah Mason was not just a tragedy, it was a wake-up call. Parents across the community held their children closer. Many admitted they could not stop thinking about Savayah's final moments. The thought of an infant, defenseless, innocent, enduring such pain was too much to comprehend. For Savayah's family, the pain remained heavy. They had justice, yes, but not healing. The image of their baby's smile, her soft giggles, and the way she reached out to be held stayed with them forever. They visited her grave often, leaving flowers, teddy bears, and balloons. They spoke her name, refusing to let her memory fade. What haunted them most was the betrayal. This was not a stranger, not an intruder. This was her father, the man meant to protect her. And that betrayal made the loss even more unbearable. Years from now, when people remember the case, it won't just be the brutality of the crime they recall. It will be the image of an 8-month-old baby girl whose life was stolen by the one person she should have been safest with. For investigators, the case never left them. Many admitted privately that it was one of the hardest of their careers. Some struggled with nightmares, replaying the evidence in their minds. They had seen countless crimes, but the murder of a baby, especially one so brutal, cut deeper than anything else. The Mason case became a grim reminder of the darkness that sometimes hides behind closed doors. It showed the community that evil can exist even in the people we trust most. But it also revealed the strength of those who fight for justice, the doctors who spoke the truth, the detectives who refused to give up, the prosecutors who stood in court and demanded accountability, and above all, it reminded the world that even the smallest life has meaning. That even a baby who lived only 8 months deserves to be remembered. Even after the trial ended and Luis Luna was locked away for life, the story of Savayah Mason continued to echo across Houston. For many, her name became a symbol, a reminder of both the fragility of childhood and the duty every adult has to protect it. Child advocates in Texas used the case to call for stronger education around child abuse and the warning signs of neglect and violence. They urged neighbors, friends, and family members not to stay silent when something feels wrong. Many pointed out that children like Savayah do not have voices of their own. They depend entirely on adults to see, to speak, and to act. And yet, in their grief, there was also determination. They had given Savayah a voice. They had fought to ensure her father would never harm another child. They had delivered justice in the only way the law could. For Savayah's mother, life would never be the same. She carried the guilt of trust, the pain of betrayal, and the unbearable silence left behind by her baby's absence. She spoke publicly only a few times, but when she did, her words pierced the hearts of everyone who heard them. "She was my whole world," she said, and in one moment she was gone. Her grief was not just for her daughter's death, but for the life that would never be lived. Every time you see a child smiling, laughing, or sleeping peacefully, remember Savayah. Remember that innocence can be fragile. Remember that protection is not just the job of parents, but of all of us. Because the next time, it might be the silence of a neighbor, a relative, or even a stranger that determines whether a child lives or dies. And so we end with this. If you are watching this, take a moment to think. If you ever sense something is wrong, if you ever suspect a child is in danger, do not stay silent. Make the call, ask the hard questions, speak up. Children do not get second chances. Savayah Mason never had hers. Her life was brief, her story is heartbreaking, but if remembering her helps protect another child, then her memory will shine brighter than the darkness that took her away. If this story moved you, please subscribe to the channel. We share real cases that matter, cases that remind us why awareness and action are so important. Comment below where you're watching from and help us spread Savayah's story. Every voice counts. Every share matters. Together we can honor her life by protecting those who cannot protect themselves.